Hey everyone and welcome. I'm your friend Art of Mana, and these are the final moments before the Panic Playdate is up for pre-order. And I just wanted to take a few moments, talk a little bit more about why I'm excited about this and why maybe you should be as well. And of course, once again, let you know that it is tomorrow, that is July 29th, 2021 at 10 a.m. Pacific time when the pre-orders are going live. So that's in less than 12 hours at this point. And the Playdate, as you already know probably from my previous videos and of course a lot of the recent, and I mean really recent news coverage about this device, looks to be a really quirky, fun, unique handheld and something that is absolutely a throwback to the past and yet does some things that are very modern, very unique, creative. And I think there is an absolutely awesome way of approaching the initial batch of games for any console or handheld that Panic is just really very clever in utilizing. And I think this is going to be a really great asset to this device's future. Now, I am primarily a console gamer and I love having a console connected to a television, slotting in a game cartridge that I have off of my shelf, and plugging in a video game controller, kicking back on the couch. That is my preferred way of playing. But even though it wasn't until later in my gaming career that I started getting into handhelds, I do see them as having something really unique and fun and creative to offer, and the Playdate is going to be no different. I probably could create a whole series of videos just on the topic of what types of handhelds are out there, sort of the categories of handhelds, and even deep dives into specific handhelds or specific categories. If you're interested in any of that, please let me know in the comments. But for now, I just do want to kind of cover a couple of basics with you as I see the handheld layout, the ecosystem of handhelds, if you will. First, I think it's worth mentioning things like these. These are the Tiger LCD games. Now, obviously, the Game & Watch would fall into a similar category. The Tiger Electronics handhelds were very simple, I would say bite-sized types of experiences with really actually beautiful graphics, but terrible animation. I think that's the crux of it, and part of why the gameplay often suffered. They're kind of creative and fun, and there's a lot of uses for that technology. And I mean, Nintendo and Tiger have come up with some wonderful games, but they were limited to one experience, and often it was a fairly shallow one at that. I say that they are limited to one experience. However, there are some exceptions. For example, this really cool device, which allowed you to actually slot in screens with all of the game circuitry in them into the top, making a sort of pseudo Game Boy-like experience. Still, this is not really what I would consider the peak of handheld technology. Later, Nintendo really created the entire market of portable video gaming with cartridges that you can slot in. And obviously, they did that with the Game Boy lineup of game consoles. This is a Game Boy Color, which was the last Game Boy of the sort of original generation to be produced. And this was a fantastic way to connect with all of a vast library of games on the go that were very simple and very inexpensive. And I think this is what all of the video game handhelds out there now have to thank for their own existence. This is the legacy, if you will. Now, even though the Game Boy paved the way for handhelds that could offer many different games through the use of cartridges and a display that could display many different types of games, I still see a use and a value for those handhelds that are singular in purpose, that might have one single game or maybe a small collection of games that you can't actually alter or update. You can't add more games. And this is one of those systems that I actually think is fairly fun. It's the My Arcade something something. I have no idea what they call this, but there's a few of them out there, and this provides some 16-bit-esque type games that are unique to this console, and some of them are not great. Some of them, however, are pretty awesome. And I think that these devices were what you see as early educational type devices. The leapfrogs were very similar in design. Now, even though there was the technology and ability to create a small library of games and put it on a handheld for sale, one of the most common uses of this technology was not unique and creative and new games and new experiences. It was instead actually one of these types of devices, which instead of having something unique to offer, opted to pirate a lot of classic games, often very poorly. And this is where you get things like 201s, etc. And this device, which is just one of those, is kind of awful, even though it looks really neat. And if they bundled this with some unique games, I bet would have been quite a neat experience. Now, while those devices that bundled together lots of pirated games typically ran on systems on a chip, there were other categories and types of handhelds that relied on very different sorts of architecture and did different things. And I think, without going too far down that rabbit hole, I just want to bring attention to these two devices. This is kind of a great example of two different ways of going about creating hardware that had maybe multiple different purposes and intents. The LDK here, which utilizes a sort of custom Linux based firmware, was really designed with the ability to port different types of games, emulators, and sometimes the ability to create and play your own games. And then this device really is just an Android device with physical controls that utilizes the Google Play Store for some Android based games, but can also obviously be utilized to emulate other classic consoles or other platforms altogether. There did arise a sort of different tier that was somewhat similar, but had an emphasis on people creating their own games. The Odroid Go is a good example of this because even though it really did attract a lot of development for emulation and the ability to play old games, classic games that you might own, it also did have a very important feature, and that is this GPIO slot right at the top. And this meant that developers could actually create unique games for the Odroid. And on the website, they were certainly encouraging this, showing even how to create a basic Tetris like clone. I personally think the best example of a console really trying to create a development ecosystem for unique games and crafting its device with no emulation in mind, but specifically the intent of people being able to tinker and create little games and people able to download those games is the Arduboy. I love this device. It's super tiny and it's got this nice matte finish on the back, but look how thin that is. You could pocket this and take it with you wherever. In fact, I took it camping with me last time. And another kind of unique thing about this, there is a different version that allows you to have up to 200 or more games stored on there. This one is the original version, and you actually have to connect this to your computer to change games, meaning at any given time, you only had one Arduboy game at your disposal, meaning that you didn't have the paralysis of choice problem. So I think the Playdate is really set in that category that the Arduboy is in. And through the use of their really unique looking website where you can develop games for the Playdate, I see a lot of people bringing their own ideas to the table and creating games free to share on the platform. But unlike the Arduboy, the Playdate is also selling games, and we don't really know exactly what that's going to look like, but we know that the original or the initial batch of games is essentially a premium set of games, games that cost money, but you pay that up front along with the cost of the device itself, which is a rather unique way to have a launch lineup. If it's successful, we might see a whole batch of games come to the platform, maybe either through a subscription service or through digital downloads. And that's something that Panic doesn't even really know, or if they have any ideas, they haven't shared them yet. Okay, A couple more things I just want to mention. Remember things like these? I mean, these were quirky little things that we obviously didn't need on a Game Boy, but it's kind of cool that they exist. And the Playdate having a stereo Bluetooth dock that charges your game console and holds your pen is just kind of the fun, unique, carefree, just joyful sort of thing I like seeing in technology. It definitely knows that it isn't necessary, and yet it's just happy to be what it is. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I think this is all just rooted in Panic's whole mentality towards this product, which they've already stated is what if we do something kind of creative and it brings joy to people? And you know what? I mean, it's hard for me to say, hey, like a product brings joy, and we don't even know if this is going to be good. Obviously, this could be a big flop, but there was a lot of care and intentionality to create something that would just be kind of fun and spark something inside of you. I think that it's important in this world of digital games to still be connected to something physical and tangible. And while I think mobile phone games are going to be around for a long time, and clearly a lot of people play them, it's interesting to note that a lot of people still want something tactile. They want buttons for their games. They want to interact with a game in a way that is a little bit more than just waving your hand on a touch screen. And I think the Playdate, with its screen that isn't backlit, is set to be something that you go outside, you bring with you, and instead of using your phone, you pick up your Playdate. And with that battery life of around 8 hours of continuous playtime, it's going to last you for a long car trip. It's going to be available in bright sunlight because of that screen. And all of those things, I think, show a device that is intended to fit into a category that we haven't really seen for a while. Something kind of like the Game Boy with its original screen and long battery life. Kind of like the Arju Boy with its emphasis on unique and new games. Kind of like the Odroid Go, where they try to give you all of the access you need to be able to make what you want. Kind of like, in some ways, the Tiger Electronics or the Game & Watch. This isn't going to be something you're going to see AAA titles on. But what it is, I think is worth the money. I really do. And it has been promoted extremely well with a very slick campaign, a very well-crafted website. And I just commend Panic for that. Obviously, I think that this Portland-based company has a real finger on the pulse of hipster gamers and probably retro game enthusiasts. And I can tell from the reviews that are coming in from the early review units and the few large sources that were able to play with the device that there's something to this. So I'm going to be trying tomorrow at 10 to get my pre-order in. Maybe you'll join me. We'll see. Anyways, my friends, do good, be well, stay safe and healthy, and I'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.